Okay, well, I guess everybody who's going to be here is going to be here already. So I want to go ahead and say that this was originally an hour talk, pretty much like all the other stable talks were. So if it feels like that I'm really hyped up on caffeine and flying through the slides, it's because I'm trying to get through everything. So let's start. So what we will cover, intro, overview of ICS, contrasting ICS and IT, the differences between the two and the similarities that we have, why this is scary, and finally, call to arms. So, intro. Who am I? My last name is pronounced Bougere. Not Booker, not Bougere, not bourgeois, where I don't know why they get those extra vowels from it, but Bougere. So, spent 13 plus years in IT. Last 10 have spent in various security roles, from network administration, system administration, log monkey, IDS guy, to finally penetration testing in my current company. I spent some time in the intelligence community doing, quote, fun things. Just leave it at that. And I am currently a senior security consultant at SecureCon. SecureCon in Alexandria. We can do things for you. So let's start with the overview. So what exactly are we talking about? So basically any system that is designed to allow maximal control over a complex environment using minimal human interaction. These can be far-flung enterprises across, hundreds of thousands of acres and miles. Could be dangerous, toxic chemicals that we don't want people interacting with. Ability to react faster than human reflexes. Generally, things that humans at the time that they were designed, these systems, were not well adapted to do. As technology has progressed, we'll see that that has not necessarily been the case, but we're still dealing with these systems that are currently in place. And the NIST 882 guide, if anybody is bored and has problems sleeping at night, I highly recommend that you read this guide. You will go to sleep very quickly. So, measurements. What do you mean by measurements, Dan? So, these systems rely on what's called a feedback loop. And hidden controller theory and all this, again, NIST 800 documentation stuff goes into this. So proportional produces change proportional to error or value. Higher, slightly change. There, it depends on the amount of error depending on the change. Integral produces change based on the duration of the error value. So if you've got something that's out of whack and it continues to be out of whack and it's going for an hour, the change keeps increasing to try to bring the value down. And finally, derivative produces change based on the slope of change. Slope keeps going high up, it goes up to correct it, slight little bit of a change, it then goes to a slight change to correct it. Most of these are not necessarily digital systems. They're mostly analog, so you have some fuzzy logic controllers in here, which are generally values between 0 and 1. Off by a little, slightly true. Okay, we adjust a little bit. Off by a lot, very true. We adjust by a lot. There is no Goldilocks value on these things. They are constantly adapting, constantly changing to the environment. So, and then we go into types of processes that these systems involve. So, discrete, industrial, robotic, and production of individual units. Widgets, license plates, stamping things out constantly, day in, day out. Basically what everybody thinks of as like a robotic factory. This is the type of systems that you would find there. Batch, input, process, output. Pharmaceuticals, chemicals, food, a whole bunch of stuff goes in, magic happens, the individual stuff goes out. Generally, batch is limited to small and medium amounts of materials. So you're not dealing with vast, huge gallons upon gallons of stuff. You generally have, like the Jesse and Heisenberg here, small individual cooks that you do and take care of with these systems. Continuous, that's when we think of like power generation, air traffic control, different systems like this that are on and constantly churning no matter what. constant input of materials, the constant output of product, large quantities of details. And then we have a hybrid, which is one system, multiple systems, connected in a line, connected in a variety of different locations. It all depends on how everything interacts together, how the inputs are handled, how the outputs are handled. These are obviously the most complex systems and the hardest to both maintain, patch, upgrade, control. So these can be an absolute nightmare to secure. So if you're dealing with these types of systems, you have to be extremely careful, because any slight change that you make while looking at it can amplify itself across the entire network, and you can end up knocking things over, which, as we all know, is bad. And so we go into contrasting ICS and IT. So, hardware, IT, everyone's familiar with these types of things. Servers, workstations, network equipment, the router switches, magic boxes that we all know and love. Human-machine interface. Then we have data historians, control servers, and PLCs. These may not necessarily be what people are familiar with. HMI can be a nice little workstation that you sit in front of and look like you're doing your normal office tasks. Or it can be a giant, huge interface that you're standing in front of with all dials and widgets and lights and stuff that you're looking at. Data historian is generally a database of the values and different types of things that have gone through the history that you use to essentially say, we are extremely out of whack, we're a little out of whack, we're doing good, or wow, we're doing amazing. This is the type of equipment that you would normally see to keep track of that information. Finally, control servers and PLCs basically keep everything in check and do what you need to do with these types of systems. And let's kind of go over there. Network equipment, same type of situation. Remote terminal telemetry units, depending on the vendor. They will either say one of these, basically just RTUs is what everybody knows and loves what they're called. Data concentrators, otherwise known as media converters. They can be dumb little boxes that you just plug in and switches a fiber to a serial or vice versa. Or they can be giant things that are in and of itself, huge devices that you have to be careful of when you're knocking these things, when you're trying not to knock these things over. This comes into play later, I promise. Digital protective relay and intelligent end devices, these are usually safety systems that are designed to either cut off power, flow, chemicals, whatever else, or to help monitor things like that, to go back to being faster than human reflexes can control these types of things. Software. Generic OS, your Windows, your Linux, your things like that. These are generally monolithic kernels for servers and workstations. Commodities, and these are patched and updated on a regular basis, right? Everybody nod their head that yes, these are patched and updated on a regular basis. Office productivity suites, antivirus HIDs, the whole, kit and caboodle of different things that we're all used to dealing with. Not so in ICS. It can be, but generally that's not what's put out on the network. These types of things are the real-time operating systems. These are designed differently than what we're used to with monolithic kernels. Different scheduling schemes that focus on eliminating locks and resource hogging. Because if you're running a nuclear power plant, the last thing you want to worry about is resource hogging or a lock on a process that controls your cooling or your power generation or the control rods or different things like that. You want to make sure that the information that is necessary to maintain the safety of that system is flowing. So you don't have time to sit here and wait for Windows to decide to release a process or start a thread or different things like that. These tend to reboot if a halt or other system delay is encountered. So if you feed it weird data or it gets weird data, it essentially throws up a kernel panic and reboots. And you'll probably never know what happened to it But that's how it was designed. It's not designed to be able to handle that type of information. It's designed just to say, nope, done, click, and go back to a regular operating state. These are typically not patched or updated because we have support agreements. And depending on your vendor, depending on the contracts and stuff that you've signed, you may not be able to patch it. You may have to go to the vendor and say, I want to do this upgrade, and they can look at you and say, well, it's nice to want things, but sorry, bub, you bought this. This is what we offer. And then the popular versions, QNX, or QNX, however you say it, VxWorks, and everyone's favorite ATM software, Windows CE. IT protocols, everyone's familiar with them. Ethernet, TCP/IP, Wi-Fi, etc. Well documented and evolved. Some have security built in. You know, basically, you know, we are all familiar with this, having been here just this weekend, right? So, yeah. ICS protocols. When I say ancient design, I'm not joking. Like, we're talking from, like, the Paleolithic era of computer science when these things were designed, when the thought that somebody would do something bad with these protocols was just a foreign concept, because who would do anything like that? We're all good people. Good people don't do things with protocols, so why design security? Who cares? Simple design is best. Modbus. Modbus is the window-licking protocol from ICS. Yeah, it's just precious. It really is. Basically, master constructs request, sends it out to slaves. Slaves respond. Everything's happy. Everybody talks to each other, and it's beautiful kumbaya world. For some, complexity is better. We have DMP3. We have DMP3 kind of looked at Modbus and went, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to include anything and everything that could ever possibly be used to support this type of system. I'm going to throw it in here and hope to God that somebody somewhere will eventually use it. It's got everything. It is just, yeah. You want flags? Fine, we got flags. You want files? We can send files. Analog input? No problem. Digital input? No problem. Yeah, it's basically your, you know, come one, come all, it's a fire sale type of protocol. Many of these old protocols can be encapsulated. Ethernet, TCP/IP, Wi-Fi, and GPRS. Anybody remember the talk that was given by somebody who, and I forget now, I meant to look it up, who walked around with the packet radio and was able to figure out the communication protocols for all the transformers in the entire area, and then just decided one time to, hey, I wonder if I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Yeah, he was able to get into the entire system with just a packet radio, because these are the type of things that are encapsulated with that. And old equipment may not work and need media converters, bumps in the wire. And bad people understand these protocols very well. And these protocols were not designed with security. So, kitten in a shark tank. Done. All right. Business concerns. SLAs for critical systems and processes, regular frequent windows, unplanned outages can be bad but not life-threatening. And if did anybody go to the sales guy talk for SANS? Like, if he says it's life-threatening, it's not life-threatening. I'm sorry. You can deal with a day of downtime. Not so much with ICS. Downtime is usually expensive, even if it's planned. When you're breaking down a power plant to do an upgrade, you schedule this a year, 2, 3 years in advance. These are often delayed. You can't exactly do your maintenance on a nuclear plant in Taft, Louisiana when there's Hurricane Katrina coming about a day or two away. Be a bad idea. When they're unplanned, is when it gets very expensive and the lawyers start looking at Chapter 13. These can actually be life-threatening. Big ones usually make the news. Congressional hearings, white papers, dogs and cats living together, Gozer, mass hysteria, that type of thing. Under an array of commodity hardware, variable regulation, some ability to tweak and find setup, we're all familiar with the general procurement process of established IT. ICS, restricted amount of generally proprietary hardware and software. Vendors love this because they can essentially charge you and say, nice network you got there. It'd be a shame if you didn't have anything for it anymore. So, older equipment may have to be kludged. We may have to sit here and go, okay, now it works. Encapsulation can help. Moderate to substantial regulation. NERC generally has a good handle on how things work in power generation. USDA is the same for pharmaceuticals. FDA is the same for pharmaceuticals, depending on the state you live in. If Texas, maybe not so much on the regulation part. California, maybe a little bit more than necessary, depending. Patches and upgrades. Usually depends on the vendor. Some are really good with patching and doing the necessary security work. Others are not. Others are basically, oh, we designed that 10 years ago. Yeah, we don't even offer that anymore. Why are you still running it? Security, here's the fun part. We all have robust solutions, commodity scanners, established methodologies. Many security professionals are familiar with this body of knowledge. Nessus, Nmap, all these wonderful, useful tools that we know about. ICS? Not a lot. There is really not a lot out there. And that's kind of sad because this technology has been around for a very long time. But nobody really, like the people who grew up and were working with it, have aged out of the industry or are too expensive to bring in to fix. How many people here are still programming COBOL? How many people here have even touched an AS400? Yeah, a few. Look around at the people who raised their hands, though.
Thanks, Dan.
Again, and so, like, my generation and younger, many security professionals are unfamiliar with this body of knowledge. They just assume that, oh, well, of course it runs Windows. It's no problem. What the hell is this? You know? Doesn't even have a GUI. What, it's all command line? Are you kidding? And the obligatory, yes. This is what happens when you try to scan an ICS network with T5 on Nmap. Bad things. Thank you. And so, well, why is this scary? Anybody remember the Ukraine power attacks? Yeah, Sam's wrote a whole nice white paper on it. So, December 23rd, 2015, coordinated cyber attack led to 225 about customers without power. Forced to go to manual mode for several hours. Anybody here work in the power industry? No? Going to manual mode in today's power industry is a bad thing. We don't like doing that. Russia is blamed. Bad attribution is always the bugaboo since Russia categorically denies any involvement. Right. So it started with spear phishing. It required users to enable the macros on pop-up. Who's surprised that they clicked them? Anybody surprised that these people clicked these things? Yeah, good. Command and control established, cred harvesting, lateral movement began. They found VPNs into the network with default creds. Or reused creds from multiple people. Found engineering and process servers on the SCADA network. Lay low and observe. This was about a 6-month-long process that was going on with this. December in Ukraine. Really good toasty time of the year for this to go on, right? Winter's not bad in Ukraine at all, right? So they launched it. So not only were the substations disconnected, But the attackers configured the UPS to fail at the central office once the attackers began. So they shut off the power, and then they shut off the UPS, so they couldn't even begin to fix it. Kind of a dick move, in my opinion, but not, you know, these are the Russians, right? They also installed malware into the media converters that bricked the media converters. Yeah, they pulled the image from the media converters, created their own, uploaded the new firmware to the media converters, then caused them all to fail, just as a little bit of salt into the wound of what's going on here. Oh, and they DDoSed the call center, too, so that nobody could call in and complain about it. So, yeah, Russians are jerks when it comes to these things. Okay? So you're saying, well, Dan, you know, come on, that's Russia. That's a state-sponsored actor. Of course this is going to be catastrophic if Russia gets involved. Nobody does that stuff here. Anybody remember this one? Anybody read about this one at all? Yeah. Some hackers were, you know, hacking about, doing their thing, and they found an AS400 that was stored on a front-end web server, because that's a good place to do that, directly connected into the internet. And they're like, wonder what we could do with this. Oh, we can change the chemical mix that's gone into the water plant. We can change the chlorine, we can change whatever else in here that causes the water to essentially become undrinkable for this entire city. Or mess with the lead levels, or arsenic, or any number of things that are controlled in water that's released that can take years to show up. Yeah, call arms. So if you do this stuff, if you know anybody that does this stuff, if you're interested in even doing this stuff, please let us know. This is important things. I usually have a slide that I've gone around and mapped all the different chemical plants and water treatment plants and wastewater treatment plants and various things, probably within about a 20 to 25 mile radius of the hotel. And then I go to Shodan and I take a picture of all the stuff that's available on Shodan for these different types of places. And then I show that there's an open source project for DMP3 that will actually has exploits written into it. So if you can find the stuff that's on the internet, you can just pull this up like Metasploit, run it, and you're into the system itself. This stuff is out there. It's scary. This type of thing will happen in the future as this becomes easier and easier to get into because we don't protect it. We don't do what we need to do in order to make sure that these systems are secure. And the final plug, call SecureCon. We can help you fix this. So, my information, if anybody's interested, I think the slides are going to be already posted on here. If not, I usually post them in my GitHub later on. LinkedIn, Bougere for Twitter, and both my emails. That's it. Any questions? Sure. Yes.
So when you go to evaluate an ICS or a SCA system, what kind of things are you using, or do you have any recommendations on how to?
So it kind of depends on the environment that you're going into. Some are more robust than others, but basic, port scanning type of thing. Nmap's good because you can really fine-tune it down. There's a couple of NSE stuff written for SCADA systems that you can use as well. Nessus, a little bit. But you've got to be really careful with these systems because if you blast traffic out, like a lot of these stuff have kilobytes of memory available. And they're used to getting 1 or 2 packets here, 1 or 2 packets there, that look the same way, that have the same type of protocol information. If you start just spitting random stuff at it, they essentially throw their hands in the air and fall over. So, but yeah, a lot of most of the open source stuff, you kind of just got to piecemeal it with and map and things like that. That's why it's kind of a pain in the ass originally to start off with, because you've just got to spend so much time being careful initially on these systems till you get a good view of the layout. So, anybody else? Yes, sir.
You're finding a lot of these companies that are stepping in, taking their phone security, don't really understand the marketing applications, underneath more on the physical side, or
so the I don't want to say it's a problem. The interesting things about these stuff is that a lot of these systems can fall under the physical security plan, and those people didn't cut their teeth on networking security, things like that. As far as they know, they plug it in and it works. If the light flashy, it is okay, type of thing. Where, we're trying to, they have like business IT that handles all the security and stuff like that, but the plant is separate. And getting that to kind of get out of that mindset and put it in here, it's becoming easier just because of like the news articles where it's like, the water plant was on the network, on the internet. What are you doing? Type of thing. So it's starting to progress because these systems are coming out of the woodwork, especially after like 9/11 and like the Ukraine attack, where it's like, oh my God, wow, we can really deal with this. We have to do that. And a big motivator is the cyber insurance industry. Because if you're not doing your due diligence, you don't get to file a claim. They just deny it because you didn't do your due diligence. So now, sadly, the lawyers get involved, and then they start having to force the issue on these types of things of, you need to do this, you need to maintain this. The network diagrams actually have to represent what the network looks like, not what it did 10 years ago type of thing. So,
what I found with this one is the standard. It happens to start.
It is.
SIP is slightly different because it's being forced regulatory-wise
yes.
onto this industry, whereas everybody else is kind of doesn't have those same types of regulations over their head.
Yeah. Well, and the issue that we all know here is that you can be compliant, but not secure. And so, with the regulations and stuff that are going to be constantly forced down people like here, well, we're compliant. Yes, and good for that. But yeah.
Yeah. That's why I say at least understanding what regulation standard is.
Well, and the challenge for these types of systems is converting it into dollars. How much is this going to cost me to do? How much is it going to cost to bring somebody in who can do this? How much is it going to cost in downtime? Versus, is it even worth to pursue? And then we start getting to like the CISSP territory of risk and all these other type scores. Yeah, but trying to convince your CEO or your CFO that no, we really should spend a couple million securing this network because a catastrophic failure will result in the company going bankrupt. And then, of course, then you run into the hyperbole, of course it will result in bankruptcy. And then it's on you to basically sit there and go, no, really, this, we violate this, we do this, we get fined this, we do this. And for us to be able to, again, break it down into dollars, this is the ultimate cost. If we don't do it, this is what's going to happen. Yes, sir?
And I think don't trust you just bring up the attention to risk management of it. I mean, if they actually have more buy-in than you do, you might just want to do that with them so they can take it all the way out there and get a little more buy-in.
And you're right, if you're on an internal team.
Yes.
But if you're on an external team coming in...
No, internal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I mean, well, but even then, you may not necessarily have buy-in. I have a friend who works in Oklahoma whose company makes widgets. And he is part of a PCI audit. And they regularly send customer credit card information back and forth, no problem, and everything else like that. And he's going, what are you doing? You can't do this. We're violating PCI. Well, this is how we've always done it. This is how our customers prefer it. I don't care. This is wrong. We can't do this. Well, what's the worst that can happen? Same type of industry with this. Well, what's the worst that can happen? Mushroom cloud over Taft, Louisiana by the Mississippi River going down to the ports? I don't know what the dollar amount would that be, but sounds bad. Oh, well, okay. Well, here's your budget type of thing, you know. So, any other questions? Yes.
Are you always seeing critical failures, or are you sometimes seeing slowdown, or, you know, because I'm thinking motivations, non-state actor but multinational, say, you know, Venezuela wants to screw with oil and gas production.
Mm-hmm.
Texas, you know, they don't necessarily want to shut the system down, but they want to limit production and output.
Again, it depends on the industry, and it also depends on the utility or producer being able to monitor that stuff. Because a lot of these people are like, what are logs? You know, and going back to the Ukraine attack, this took place over 6 months. Their log retention policy was 90 days. So after 90 days, any of the logging that would have led to this information was gone. Well, so then how do you keep track of that? How long do you keep your logs? Who's going over the logs? What are you looking for type of thing? Where with these types of, and because of the protocols and systems that are involved with are a little cryptic to other people, your regular log monkey may not even know what to look for and just sees a whole bunch of stuff, comes up, and it's like, oh, these are false positives. These always happen. I don't know what's going on type of thing. So it really is one of those areas that if you know what you're looking for, of course you see what's going on. If you don't know what you're looking for, it can fly right by you.
And in terms of expertise, because I mean, you know, if you're talking about, you know, scoring with somebody's production in a foreign company, you know, you need significant resources to understand the lay of the land.
Yes.
And in terms, you know, not so much with the non-critical stuff you just pull and show down, are there non-state actors who are throwing resources into learning foreign information?
So
ICS.
Again, it boils down to dollars. Big thing right now is ransomware because it's quick, easy. You can throw stuff out there and people will pay you for it. I could easily see Siemens in a very much cut-out, hands-off type of approach go after Hitachi because those are two big major producers of these types of equipment.
Right.
I mean, economic espionage goes on constantly.
Right. And
for that type of system, I could if you could monetize it for those groups, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit situation. They'd much rather spend their resources on, you know, exploit kits, ransomware, things like that. They're quick, done, repeatable. It's more geared towards nation-state stuff with this type of thing, just because it's power, because it's water. Yes, and so that if it's more of like a cyber warfare. I hate to use a term, but like, you know, modern cyber warfare weapons. We don't necessarily need the atom bomb, carpet bombing, and things like that. If an invasion force is coming in, like with Ukraine or in the Crimea or something like that, they execute, they shut off power, they shut off water, they shut off everything else. Everything's paralyzed and it's done. It's kind of hard to monetize that because, you know.
So the cost benefits too low for the industrial.
Exactly. You know, especially when there are quicker and easier things to do to earn the money. That's it. Going once. Sold. Thank y'all for coming.